Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let these handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Now here are your hosts, Russ Morgan and Joey Murray.
Welcome. This is the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Your host, Joey, the Italian Stallion Murray, joined as always by Russ, the Idea Guy Morgan. All right. So Russ, today's guest he's a freak. Okay. Or he's not a freak himself, but he's the leader of freaks. We're talking about Dan Sheeks of SheeksFreeks.
Why would you say freaks? What would a freak be in your vocabulary?
Well, the good news is this is a positive thing because the freak in this case is somebody that's doing something different. They are actually diving deep into learning financial literacy and ideas around finances in high school. I mean, what were you doing in high school, Russ?
I can't tell you. I will not tell you because it was not good. It was not good. I can assure you, I was not reading books like I got our daughters, Rich Dad, Poor Dad for teens. And that's what I want them to start learning and reading through. Now, I had to do it twice because I didn't read a whole lot as a kid. I still don't read a lot like the fine print now.
Yeah.
And as you know, I think I mentioned this on the podcast before, I bought a couple of these books and I didn't really look real hard. And the Walmart shopper in me bought the cheapest version I could find, the $5 version. And it was the miniature version of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which was really just like this wisdom. It was like the secrets. It's like the headliners to this book. Imagine a matchbook. And then there's words in it.
It literally, when it came in the mail, I thought, I just need to dip this in a glass of water and let it grow into an actual book. But
and I think that's funny. Like, you know, I remember when Meg and I were in college, somebody was telling me about this movie called Spinal Tap. I said, oh, you got to go watch it. It's so funny. I was like, all right. So we go down to the store, we rent it, VHS.
Ooh, dating himself.
We come back, we put it in the VCR, and it wasn't the movie Spinal Tap. It was the making of the movie Spinal Tap.
So kind of like behind the scenes mockumentary.
That's right. And so I think about that as we bought this, you know, like clips from Rich Dad, Poor Dad for teens. But the whole point to that story is just that I think that's important for our kids to learn. And that's why I want them to read this book, how Rich Dad operated versus their poor dad, and get them to start thinking. And our guest today, Dan Sheeks, that's what he's doing. He's really passionate about teaching teens about personal finance and helping them develop a passion for this. And I think if you have teens or you have soon-to-be teens, this would hopefully be an episode that maybe will inspire you to have conversations with your kids. We're going to have Dan come in to do a live Q&A with us next week. And I want to start building out, Joey, some section inside of our community that could be devoted toward maybe some of the best practices, best resources for our kids to start learning how to be entrepreneurs as well as we are.
Yeah, no doubt. By far, this is one of the subject matters that you continually tell us is a challenge. And Russ and I are right there with you. We have lived it. We have the teenagers right now, and we run businesses. We're super entrepreneurial, but getting that message into our kids is very difficult. And so we knew when we ran into Dan that we had to get him on the show. We had to share him with you, and hopefully we all can learn some different ways to get our teens to be thinking differently and get ahead of where we started.
Well, a very selfish episode because we were really interested in this because of how much we do want to get our teens as passionate about this sort of things as we are. So I hope you're going to enjoy this episode. Let's jump in with Dan Sheeks. Joey, if I wanted to be an expert
I'm maybe not an expert, but I still wanted to be knowledgeable on the whole concept of the infinite banking process. And I went to community.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com. I got access for free because that's what you gave me because I'm listening to this podcast. What would I do in there in order to learn more?
Simple as pie. Go to the left-hand side, click on courses, and there you can find Infinite Banking 101 and Infinite Banking 201. Can't wait to see you on the inside.
That is at community.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com.
Welcome into the show. We have Dan Sheeks as our guest today. Going to be dropping some knowledge bombs. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Russ and Joey. I appreciate you guys having me on and excited to be here. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Well, Dan, Joey is a freak in of itself. We tend to
How did I know?
talk about his eating paralysis, but you obviously have a really cool kind of backstory and background of what you're doing. SheeksFreeks is the brand that you're touting out there. You're teaching the young people of our nation about entrepreneurship. You're teaching them about personal finance. You're teaching them basically what a lot of school systems are not, and that's how to create value and to create money for themselves outside of being an employee. And I applaud that, Dan. I'm so excited to ask you a lot of questions because Joey and I both have teenagers. And, you know, that is a common question that we ask is how can we teach them? And just pre-show, you mentioned something that I'd love to start off with is why do you think it's easier for someone who's not familiar with the kid to be able to teach them on a subject matter that you may be an expert on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's just the way the mind of a teenager works. They like something new. They like something fresh. They like a different perspective. So as parents and myself as a high school teacher, we're kind of at a disadvantage because we're not the fresh face in the room or voice on a podcast or whatever it may be. And any parent out there listening knows very, very well that our kids don't listen to us maybe as much as they should, even if we're telling them all the right things. But as soon as they hear that same thing that we're preaching from someone else, someone new, someone different, it can stick. And as a teacher, I see that in my classroom quite a bit too. That's why I bring in a lot of guest speakers to talk about the same stuff because they just need to hear from someone else. That's
awesome. Yeah, I know. I if we could just dive a little bit deeper into the minds of teenagers for us, just uncover all the things that you know about them. Just kidding.
I wish I could. If I could write a book on that, I would, because I'd probably make a lot of money. There's a lot of parents out there that want to know the answers. I have been teaching high school for 17 years. I've learned quite a bit about young people in that time. But one thing I have learned more than anything is that it's pretty impossible to understand the mind of a teenager 100%. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. So Dan, tell us a little bit about what really kind of fuels your passion to teach this specific subject about personal finance to teenagers in particular.
There's a lot of different components to that answer. I feel very, very strongly that personal finance is something that should be taught to every young person in our country, in the world. But it's not, and it hasn't ever been. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so tough to change that. I work with a number of people and groups to advocate for personal finance education in our high schools and all grade levels, actually, K through 12. And there's a lot of roadblocks. There's a lot of roadblocks in the way. And I don't know that we need to get into that now. That's maybe a different podcast as to why those roadblocks are there and how to overcome them. But it's just something that we all just need to know. We at the very least, we need to know personal finance basics, and a very small percentage of our students get that knowledge by the time they leave high school and go out into the real world, which is really sad. It's actually, I categorize it as kind of a disgrace for our country to be so illiterate when it comes to finance and how to manage our own money. So my personal passion, I would say there's kind of four components. I love working with young people, obviously, been a high school teacher, and I am in love with my job. It is awesome. I love my kids and my school, my program. So working with young people, obviously I have a passion for personal finance education. I have a passion for financial independence movements, and the opportunity for early financial independence if you're making the right decisions with your money. And then also real estate investing is another passion of mine. My wife and I own 15 units in a couple different states. It's not something we spend all our time doing, but it's definitely one of the components for us in our portfolio for investments. And so I like teaching young kids about real estate investing as well, because it's something that many people don't know, but you can invest in real estate at a very young age. So you add all that together, and that's kind of where I came up with the SheeksFreeks community. I like to say that if you are a young person and you think about your money and you care about your financial future, you are not normal. Most young people don't think about money at all, other than how much do I have? And that means I can spend that same amount. So if you're actually thinking about your money and your financial future, you are different. Therefore, you're kind of a freak, but in a very good way.
Yeah.
That's where the SheeksFreeks came from.
I love that. A second ago, you said only a small percentage of kids are getting access to this sort of content. Give us some statistics to that. Like, what percentage of high schoolers are getting access to personal finance courses, just like yourself, that you're teaching in your high school?
So my specific high school, we're a pretty large high school. We have about, if we round it off, we have 4,000 students in my high school. That's a pretty good size. And personal finance is a semester-long class that's offered in my school. And I teach that class. I'm not the only one, but I'm one of the teachers for that class. But it's an elective class. Not all, it's for kids who actually want to sign up for the class. So at the end of the day, probably about 5% of our graduates will take that personal finance class. And then some other statistics. At last count, I think there's 17 states out of 50 that require a personal finance class for graduation. I live in Denver, Colorado, and Colorado is not one of those 17, obviously. That's slowly changing. Most states that don't offer the class will require some personal finance, but it looks more like a unit, and that would be embedded in like an American government class or some other kind of economics class that are required to take. So they're not really getting too much in those states.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, that's the part that a lot of times I think as parents, maybe the reason why we are illiterate on this subject is because we weren't taught. And then what information was taught to us maybe not have been perfect information, right? Maybe it wasn't taught from someone who was doing real estate investing like yourself. I mean, I love the fact that not only are you teaching young people on this subject, but you're actually living it out, right? I mean, I think the best teachers are always the ones who have real life experience, not just someone who opened a book and can read the book better than the next. What have you seen in your own personal real estate development and your own portfolios that you've been able to take that knowledge and then pass it down to the kids?
Yeah, great question. Real estate investing is one of my main passions, and I love talking about that subject. So I definitely bring that up in my classrooms quite a bit. And they kind of get into it. The students, I mostly teach juniors and seniors, and they get pretty interested in the idea of real estate investing when I kind of lay it out there and I put some numbers on a board and lay out maybe one particular property that my wife and I are thinking about buying or that we just bought and we're renting it out, and crunch some numbers with them. They tend to kind of pay attention, and it's interesting for them. And then I usually take it a step further and say, this is something you can do at a young age. Most people think real estate investing is for old, rich men who have money and connections and power, but it's something that I have a blog post I wrote for Bigger Pockets that is called How to how to invest in real estate before you turn 21. And the whole idea is to buy your first real estate investment property before you can buy an alcoholic beverage. So before you turn 21, I call it REI before a Mai Tai. And it lays out the steps to do that. It's really not too difficult. There's 4 components. It's education, credit score, saving money for a down payment, and then knowing what you're doing and being able to execute and finding the right property. So I haven't been teaching or talking about real estate investing in my classes for too long, just 3 or 4 years, but hopefully some of those students, my former students, will be pulling the trigger on their own investments pretty soon.
Let me ask you this, Dan. What do you feel like is one of the biggest hurdles when you sit down with that brand new class in the fall, and it's all these folks? Now, granted, they're motivated because they're coming to this as an elective, right? It's not required. You don't have people being dragged into your classroom. But what do you feel like is the biggest hurdle facing those children or those teenagers at that point that you have to overcome in your class?
Another great question. The biggest hurdle would be the mindset that most Americans fall into, that the trap that you have to work 9 to 5 till you're 65. And most of their parents are doing that path. They're working until they're 65, and that's when they will retire. So as a child, when you grow up in a household of a parent that's working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and they talk about retiring at age 65 or thereabouts, then as that child starts to think, well, that's the norm, that's the expectation, that's what I'm going to do.
Right.
And so breaking that mentality with young people to say, no, there are other options, that you could reach financial independence at a very early age in life. And in fact, many people have already done that. And here are some examples. I have guest speakers come into my class that have reached financial independence in their 20s. And so if you do the right things with your money, if you earn more and spend less and invest the difference wisely, you can reach that financial independence number at a very early age. And then we do talk about, what does retirement mean? Does it mean that you're not going to work another day in your life? No, probably not. But it's the freedom to do what you want with your time, when and how you spend your time. And you'll probably earn more money doing something you're passionate about, but you'll have the freedom to choose that no matter what it may be.
All right, Russ, we're talking about how we need more time freedom. We want to stop trading time for money. We want to tell our daughter, no, I don't have to go to work today. What's standing in our way?
Bro, I can tell you this, it's not need, it's want. I absolutely want to say, yes, sweetie, I can stay home. I don't have to be there. But the thing is, I have to take control. If you're like me, you want to take control right now, go to freecall.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com. Jump on a 15-minute call with one of our coaches, and they will walk you through a path that'll help you take the first step into being able to answer that question for the rest of your life, that no, I don't have to go, because I have created time freedom through creating a process and a system that can get me there and get me there faster.
All right, I have 2 questions to follow up. When you introduce this idea of, hey, this isn't the norm, like you don't have to just comply and go with the herd, that this, retire at 65 idea. One, I want to know, what does that light bulb moment look like when you go over that with your class? And 2, have you had any blowback from the parents as a result of them coming home and being like, hey, mom and dad, you're doing it wrong. What are you doing? So anyway, you may mix and mingle those 2 questions, but I'm curious.
So the first one's easier to answer than the second one. So the first question, light bulb moments when they start to realize, I would say that kind of comes around the beginning of the semester, when we're talking about things like compound interest, when we're talking about things like return on investments, when we talk about things like savings rates. The average American saves 5, 6, 7, 8% of their income But if you're frugal and you take care of your money, you can bump that all the way up to 50 or 60% savings rate. And what does that look like now for your financial runway and reaching financial independence? So I try to have that light bulb moment come earlier rather than later, because that's the buy-in for them. Now, dealing with the parents, that's a little tricky, right? Because it's all about the setup. So I tell my students, I say, okay, we're going to talk about some other ideas, some other thoughts around money. And I usually say, the typical path most people take to work until you're 65, there is nothing inherently wrong with that pathway. It has worked for millions and millions of people. And it is a great way to live your life. You can be very happy working until you're 65. And if your parents are doing that, as my parents did, there's nothing wrong with that. But there are other options. And my job, I feel like as a teacher, I will tell them is to just give you the options and then let you decide. If you know your options and you decide you want to work full-time until you're 65, then okay, that's your choice. You get to make that choice for your life. So I set it up in a way that I say, when you go home and your parents ask you, what did you learn in school today? Please don't tell them that I said, A, they're living their life wrong. Please don't tell them, B, that I'm telling you not to go to college, because we'll have that conversation too about, is college something that you really have to do? In my school, most of the kids in my classes are going to go to college. And that's definitely okay, but you need to understand what are the pros and cons of that decision. And so we talk about those. But I never say don't go to college. I think going to college is a good idea for most young people, but not for all. So we talk about those options too. And then, in communication with the parents, I'm pretty open with, the idea that I share different thoughts, but in the end, I try to leave it up to the students to make up their own mind for themselves. I have yet, knock on wood, gotten major pushback from parents, because I think if you ask any adult really out there, the question, should there be more personal finance education in schools? I think 99% of them would say absolutely. So the fact that their child's in a personal finance class or in a marketing class or in an entrepreneurship class, they are probably the parents who are supportive of different trains of thought and advancing their own child's financial future. And so they usually support me in those types of things.
Yeah.
How many times have you had a parent come in and said, hey, you were teaching my daughter about buying real estate, and she was walking through some of those numbers with me. I'm interested in how to do that. Like, how many times are you getting the ask to tutor the parent on some of these conversations? Does that ever happen?
It has happened. It's not often. I had one parent last year that came in and she didn't kind of just come out and say, hey, teach me. I mean, she was just more clarifying some of the things in a very positive way that I was teaching her son, and was kind of picking my brain for more information. Yeah. Now, I should say that in my classes, I do talk about these subjects, but it's not the main curriculum. So I have a curriculum that I teach in my classes that I focus on. And then, maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, we'll take, I call it a FI day, an FI day, where we just talk about financial independence topics and things like real estate investing, building passive income, savings rates, frugality. So we'll talk about those, but it's not, I wish I could design a class that was just called Financial Independence for Teens and teach only that type of stuff. But in personal finance class, there's a lot of basic information they need to get first, real basic information. In my marketing classes I teach, I need to get through the marketing curriculum, and every once in a while I'll just sprinkle in some financial independence information for those kids.
Well, Dan, I think that all you have to do is say it, and you make it happen. We can help you create this financial independence for teens course. That's a really easy deal to do, right? You're talking to the idea guy. Like, I can come up with a million ways where we can make that happen. The
course is done. I mean, there's so many resources out there that teach the class. The tough part is the red tape of getting it as an approved class. But
Yeah,
I like your enthusiasm. I like where you're going.
Well, you may not be able to get it done inside the school system, but
we approve it.
It needs to happen for sure. Well, let's get into SheeksFreeks a little bit. So sitting here looking at your website, get your freak on. I know that's got to be fun to talk about. Joey likes to say paying down debt like a boss. So right. I can see, getting your freak on in a similar light. Talk a little bit about your site, the things that you've been able to build on it. I noticed that not only do you have blogs and different categories there, but you also help people find out where to start. If you're a beginner, where does this happen? So, where did the idea of taking this personal finance course that you're teaching, starting talking about financial independence there in the class, how did that morph to doing it outside and building a whole website and creating an Instagram following? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, the impetus for the SheeksFreeks community was, it was a positive that came out of a negative, honestly. I obviously feel very strongly about personal finance education for our young people. When I, at one point, approached some decision makers in my school district about making the class a requirement, just that idea. I wasn't saying, hey, we need to do this. I said, let's talk about it. The response was a no. And I won't get any more into it than that, but it was made very clear to me that wasn't going to happen, at least in my school district. So instead of just quitting, I said, well, in what other way can I advocate for personal finance education to young people? And the idea was, well, I'll just start my own thing, and it won't be in schools, but it'll be out there where young people pay attention. So Instagram is a big one. Mobile friendly website is the other big platform for SheeksFreeks. So built the website, which is right now mostly a blog site, and I post articles that are very pertinent and specific to young people, teenagers. Anything from when and how should you get your first credit card, to buying a new car versus a used car, to what is financial independence and what is passive income. So those are the topics that we're talking about on the website. The Instagram page for SheeksFreeks is, they're very much connected. The Instagram is more about, if you guys know Instagram well, which maybe you do, maybe you don't.
I'm pretty much an expert. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got at least 14 followers at this point.
Exactly. It's just short little posts and snippets about financial independence and money management. And kids like it, and if they like it enough, they follow. And then of course there's links going back to the website and different blog posts on the website.
Let's talk about where SheeksFreeks is going. I'd love to kind of hear your ideas of how. I mean, you mentioned earlier you're trying to keep up with some of your students that have come through your class who've now gone on. Are you looking for a way to track and see the success of those and be able to shine light upon that? And what are some other things that you're trying to do with SheeksFreeks?
It's pretty exciting, honestly. I with coronavirus and obviously being a teacher, I had the summer off. The last 3 to 4 months, I've had a good amount of time to spend working on SheeksFreeks, more than I thought I ever would, while keeping other things in my life in balance too. So, and you guys as parents know what I'm talking about. So it's kind of taken off, honestly. The Instagram page is really doing well. I'm happy with that. The website's getting some traffic, but hopefully more in the future. I hired a subcontractor who's actually a former student of mine to take over and help build up a YouTube channel and a Facebook page. And she's doing some really good work there. So our YouTube channel is in its infancy, but it's starting to grow. I have some different videos posted up there, and the videos are always young people. My face doesn't need to be on this brand, because if it is, it's just going to be it's going to be like their dad talking to them about money, and that's not going to be too exciting. So I get a lot of young people, mostly alumni and other young people I've connected with, to make videos, write guest blog post articles, and put out content and updates about what they're doing and how they're doing it. Because I think that's much more interesting to the young people than, someone our age talking to them about money. That's just not going to resonate. So the people I work with, the young people I work with, I have a mastermind group of about 20 from around the country that I've kind of connected with, who are super motivated. I call it the SheeksFreeks mastermind group. We have a Slack page that we communicate with, and we meet once a week on a Zoom call as well. And they're doing some amazing things, and they're anywhere from 15 to 20 years old. And I'm now starting to get them involved with creating content like videos and articles and putting those up on the SheeksFreeks platforms. I had to get through some legal stuff to do that. So I worked with a lawyer for a waiver, and now that's all in place. So we'll be starting to do more of that here in the near future.
Really cool. I think that's so smart to get the core audience to be speaking to that individual, because they're going to learn from what those people are doing. I mean, we see that with our audience, where they love hearing from our clients and people that they see very similar to them, teaching on subject matter and showing what they've done, because it's just about inspiration, right? You want to get these kids motivated to want to learn more. And I know you can only do so much in a semester at school. So I love what you've done with the website. I love the Instagram story, and we're just excited that we get to bring this unique message, Joey, to our audience, right?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, Dan, I wanted to see if you wouldn't mind coming into our community, being a guest in there, and also sharing maybe a deeper dive on a Q&A session where some of the families that are listening can ask more questions of you as the expert on, you're like in the Matrix, man. I mean, you're able to see the inner workings of a teenager's mind, and like everybody wants to know that. So, but truly, like learning the resources and the tactics and the ways in which you're educating teens on this would be super valuable for our community. Would you be willing to come in and do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do it.
Awesome. So if you're listening and you have not already become a member of our inner circle, you need to do that so you can get access to content like this, to go deeper with guys like Dan. You can go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/inner circle and join today so that you can be ready for us on Tuesday when this Q&A goes live.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for taking time to impart this into the young people out there. I mean, you say 15 to 25-year-olds, and that's one of those areas that I think is so vital for them to learn a process that can help them get out of the rat race. We talk about that a lot on our show, is taking control and setting their course so that they can create a life worth living. And it takes teachers like yourself that are willing to go over and above just the requirement and to really help our young people, which are our future and are going to be the ones that are going to be leading us down the road. And we want them to know these sort of subjects so that they can be qualified. So thank you again for coming on the show and for all that you're doing.
You're more than welcome. Happy to be on the show. And I thank you guys for doing what you're doing. We're all on the same mission, just spreading the knowledge and getting people on board. And I'm very excited to get more involved with the network that you've built. And yeah, we'll just keep trucking along here, getting our freak on.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks as always for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand, so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.